Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Namaste. Okay, verse 13, chapter 13, verse 34. Just as the sun, we have seen last class the example of space to explain the nature of Brahman, the nature of Purusha, is as subtle as space, as accommodating as space, all pervasive as space, with the fundamental difference is that space is inert energy, and Purusha is the very source of consciousness, sentience, and so on. So now we're going to see the example of light, the sunlight. Just as one sun illumines the world, so also does k.etrajña, illumines the entire kshetram, Lord Arjuna. So it's the same principle. We have the same concepts. We have two principles operating here. One is consciousness, the other is matter/energy. And now we are looking from the standpoint of Chit, the conscious nature of reality, of Brahman. Brahman is conscious existence. You can say an existence of something, oh, it is existence, I know. The cup exists, the computer exists, everything exists. But just try to visualize, understand something which is consciously existing. And then we say, oh, I myself, I consciously exist. And then the scripture, there you go, you got it. You consciously exist. Okay, you have the nature of conscious existence. The only trouble with the jiva is that he takes the I to be prakriti, the body-mind, and then say, I, the prakriti body-mind, I conscious exist. Yes, but the body-mind does not inherently, intrinsically, has this conscious existence. The conscious existence belongs to Purusha, which is our very nature, but not the very nature, as so to speak. It's difficult to put it into words. It's the true nature of the body-mind, but the body-mind, in its inferior nature, does not have self-contained conscious existence. So the jiva is going to say, yes, I know Satchit Brahman is conscious existence, and I am a conscious existing person. And the only thing to sort out is like what this I refers itself to. Because the prakriti I has a sort of borrowed, dependent conscious existence. Therefore, the prakriti nature of the jiva can never say, I am conscious existence. I say, this body-mind sense complex, in truth, fundamentally, intrinsically, is conscious existence. It's the only source of existence, the only source of consciousness. That is my higher nature. So we have this thing, spirit and merit and matter operating in this world. And the analogy here takes the sun. The sun is the illuminator, that by which things are known. It's a huge, beautiful, wonderful example to describe consciousness, which is the ultimate means by which things are known. So, but in analogy, without the sunlight, we don't know anything. So therefore, the sun is illumining the entire universe, the entire cosmos, relatively, pervading the entire cosmos, relatively. And just as the sun is illumining everything, consciousness is illumining the entire cosmos. The sun is relatively illumining the entire cosmos. Oh, but there are many suns and so on. That's okay. Let's keep it only our planet, our world. The sun, our sun is illumining our world, the entire world. Likewise, consciousness is illumining the entire mithya order of reality. Shvara Jiva Jagata, in the subtle, in the causal, and in the physical material manifest. So that is the analogy. There is a subtle difference between space and light. In the same way, we call two different natures of the one in the same Brahman, which is conscious existence, the source of consciousness that somehow concedes consciousness to every living creature. What is a living creature? Is an object with three bodies. So when we have three bodies, and then there is consciousness shining as a hum, consciously or subconsciously. That is the conscious aspect of Brahman. But the existence shines as well, not only in the sentient beings, but also in the inert world of objects. So we have these two principles. They are beautifully described by these two examples, consciousness and matter. So Swami goes about describing the sunlight, explain the sun is very far away. And then he says, but the sun is not really pervading everything. This is a good distinction that he often presents. Remember, we are not talking about the sun. Because the sun is so far away, it does not really pervades and illumines. What illumines our world is sunlight, is rays of sun, which travels. Sometimes a star has died long ago, but light is still traveling. So there is a distinction, and this distinction is important because once we understand these teachings, and then we need to claim our true nature as identical to the nature of Brahman. I am at the nature of consciousness. But what kind of consciousness? Human consciousness, reflected consciousness, or mind. So the mind is intrinsically of the nature of consciousness. But how can you equate this Tatvamasi, this Aham Brahmasmi, is not by saying that it's the same consciousness, it's the same light of consciousness, the same way, it's the same ray of light that somehow hits our world in a night of full moon. The nature is light rays coming direct from the sun. Is just light rays. The sun does not come, the rays come. They come directly or they come indirectly. The jiva experiences an indirect reflection of its true nature as consciousness. And we need to understand this distinction because the nature of this reflection is identical of its original source of consciousness. The existence of this body-mind is relatively eternal, even though the body-mind fades, the physical body fades. But the existence is one and the same, and it's eternal. All objects appear and disappear in this apparent order called mithya. So here we have this subtle distinction. It's not that the sun comes here, but the light comes here. And this light is coming and penetrates our world and pervades everything. during the daytime and so on. So as we know, all these analogies, these comparisons, they have some common features, but some defects as well. Yeah. So here, k.etram, sunlight is only one. The sunlight is only one. And in our solar system, we have one sun and it illumines everything here. So it's the sunlight is only one, traveling all directions and hits some other bodies and producing reflections that are going to be superimposed upon this. The original sunlight is a very beautiful phenomenon. Therefore, we can say that sunlight somehow pervades the entire world relatively to our planet. And as we know, one is Nivikarana, Karatva. The light does not undergo any change. So it somehow, it may appear more intense here and there, but fundamental, when you look close enough, it's just light rays. Basically, is only light, okay, reflecting here and there, being filtered by this and that. If there are clouds, it's a little bit filtered, but when you look at the light ray, it's light ray, fundamental is the same ray. If you look at it directly, it may blind you. It's better you look at it once it's filtered or bounces on something, you know. So the light is free from all these variations. It does not associate. It's a sangatvam. It hits the moon. It goes through the air that may be very polluted, and it falls everywhere. It illumines everything indiscriminately and never being affected by anything. Same way the space is not contaminated by anything. It accommodates light, falls on everything without being affected by any attribute, because space is almost completely attributeless. In light, it's very subtle as well. It's an effect of fire. Now, the very subtle element called fire. Fire is so subtle that it does not get affected by anything that comes after it. You know, once you have light, and then we have water, and we have earth, and then the denser realms that can come from the subsequent elements are denser, and the light is not affected by anything like that. The light is not affected even by the air. The air may be polluted. And of course, the light is not affected by space, the most fundamental element. It travels through space without any resistance, without any filtering. So there are similar features. Another one is the light and space. They are not divisible. They are Advaita. They are partless. Cannot divide light and space. If there is no light in your house, when there is no current in your house, what you can do? You cannot keep cutting some slice of light and put in your closet. So when there is no electricity, you use those chunks of light to illumine your house. No, it's Advaita, cannot be divided. The light illumines everything. Likewise, the Atma also reveals everything, makes known the unknown. Without light, everything is unknown. Therefore, light is a symbol of knowledge, and darkness is a symbol of ignorance. Without light, there is no knowledge. Without consciousness, there is no knowledge. That's why the inert world of objects, they cannot know anything. They are totally ignorant, more or less like the jiva when it goes into deep sleep. It becomes so tamasic, so mattery, that it does not know anything. If matter alone is there in the universe, there will be nobody to know anything. If there is no consciousness to reveal matter, so the universe is there, and then a philosophical question, is it really there or not there? If there is no consciousness to know the prakriti universe, without us conscious beings being present to know the universe, so nobody's conscious of anything. So there is no subject-object relationship at all. So if you pull the conscious jiva, there is no relationship, knower, known, experiencer, experience, subject and object. Therefore, consciousness is the illuminator of everything, like the sun. This philosophical question about if there is no consciousness, is the universe really there, yes or no, is fundamentally impossible or mistaken, or because you cannot conceive a creation without consciousness to witness it. You understand? Creation comes with a duality. There's all this philosophical question about if there is nobody to see and the tree falls in the middle of nowhere, did it really fall or not fall? And then philosophers go about making huge discussions, But fundamentally, it's based on an absurd premise, which is the possibility of having the universe without consciousness to witness the universe. That should be there. And who are the witnessing entities? The jivas. The jivas from the vegetal realm, from the animal realm, and from the human realm. So we are small conscious beings illumining our environment, our own environment. We have this reflect consciousness that allows us to illumine and know. So not only consciousness is illumining everything, but we know our surrounding. Not only the light, sunlight is illumining everything, but we need the light of consciousness reflect on your own subtle body to illumine. And then we have consciousness knowing Jiva's own environment. You understand? In analogy, the sun and the reflect consciousness, which is a sort of sun, because the sun is going without which we, Jiva, cannot know anything. But without consciousness, reflect as the human consciousness. And then there's no way to know anything. So consciousness is the ultimate pramana. Pramana is that in which present things are illumined and known. So those are the parallels between consciousness and the sunlight in our planet. It does so without being affected, without getting polluted, and so on. And we cannot touch the light. We cannot taste it, we cannot smell, we cannot hear the light. In fact, you cannot even see the light. I have often told you when the light is here, is because it's reflecting. I had this conversation with my son the other day. He's very interested in scientific knowledge. And he was challenging me a little bit because I was saying that the sunlight does not illumine our planet. It's the reflection upon the particles we see in our atmosphere that produce reflected light. Because he was saying that there are some experiments done by Elon Musk to bring these solar panels into deep space to get all the energy from the sun to produce energy for all these AI databases, because we don't have AI database and power to supply to produce this race about AI. So, and then he was telling me, no, in the deep space out there, there is sun and there is a sunlight. You don't experience as reflect sunlight, but you experience it. What they do is they turn those panels to the sun. The sun you see very far away. You don't experience as a bright light, but the sun is traveling through the dark space, and that's enough to capture energy in those solar panels. You don't experience, it's still dark around you, but you see like that, you see the sun, but you don't experience the reflect light of the sun because there are no particles. Interesting thing. So Swamis remind us from this scientific evidence that we cannot even see the light directly, we see the reflection. To see the light direction would blind our eyes. So the definition of Atma was given by k.etram. In the previous verse, we see the comparison of consciousness, of existence with space, or Brahman compared to Akasha. And here we see Prakasha. So this Brahman I am, therefore, what is my knowledge? I relatively am like Akasha, and relatively I am like light. So this is a good help for meditation. You can meditate on the nature of conscious existence. You can use these examples, knowing exactly that there are common features. So you have to hold on to the common features and reject the uncommon features of light and space, because you want to stay established in your identity as consciousness, not as space. You want to be established as pure existence, not as light or space. Those are examples, and they are all extract from the Katha. Now, the last verse of this chapter with the eye of knowledge, those who know does the distinction between the kshetra and k.etrajña, as well as the absence of prakriti, which is the cause of the universe and all beings. Those who know this difference, this distinction, those who have done this Rebecca between spirit and matter consciousness and prakriti, as well as understood that prakriti is only as good as non-existent because it is an appearance within Purusha consciousness. So one who understood the mithya nature of prakriti, who understood the difference between the real spirit and the apparent prakriti, the real k.etrajña and the apparent kshetra, those have attained the clear knowledge, the knowledge and respect of reality, the supreme goal. It's pretty much that is wrapping up this chapter, once again, describing how this knowledge should be correctly gained and retained clearly. No confusion, no distinction, no confusion, no superimposition. You need to do this discrimination to know clearly, without mutual superimposition between spirit and matter, consciousness and prakriti. And it's not as easy. It's simple. It's the most simple tool Vedanta presents us with. Just discriminate satya from mithya, atma from anatima. What is anatima? Is matter and energy. What is atma? Is the spirit of pure consciousness, which is not an energy. So just do this viveka. But due to the subtleties, first, k.etrajña consciousness is extremely subtle. And there are several constructs in the of prakriti nature which are so subtle that somehow, we get confused. Like the redness of a rose, a red rose that appears transferred to a clear crystal. So likewise, the elements of some very subtle elements of prakriti, they are so subtle that somehow it's easy for us to see, okay, now I'm getting closer to the nature, my own nature as Purusha, as consciousness. And then still this tendency of this extroversion to see Purusha as something other than the subject principle, something other, something that can be known objectively. And then I project the subtlety, natures, the subtlety attributes of prakriti to consciousness because of the habit of wanting to see consciousness objectively. You understand? So the difficulty is as the mind becomes more and more subtle, it starts coming close, and this old tendency to wanting to see Brahman objectively, start seeing Brahman objectively by projecting some attributes of Prakriti upon Brahman. This is unavoidable. That's why it becomes a slow process by which the inquirer, the Vedanti, gets to again and again a point and then has to understand not this, not this, not yet this, not this. I'm the light illumining and revealing anything with any sort of attribute. So there is still superimposition of k.etram upon k.etrajña. And then, again and again we go doing that until somehow the mind lose its power to project Brahman as something other than the seer, the investigator, the inquirer, and so on, the true nature of the inquirer. This is the last obstacle there is. The final obstacle is this subtle tendency, this subtle vasana that wants yet to see Brahman objectively as something, that can be said to be an experience. Brahman is not an objective experience. Brahman is not even an object of knowledge. Brahman is the true nature of everything and has to be understood and seen by the old tool mechanism of negating anything with attributes that change with nature, appears and disappears. The most common is wonderful states of deep meditation, samadhi, that somehow can deceive the inquirer because it can be the most seductive kind of prakriti. When you see mental states and it feels so amazing, you experience this and that, you say, now I got to my destination. And then one has to remember, did it go about changing through my experience? Yes. And did it appear and disappear? Yes. Forget it. Don't go there. don't follow that route. And remember always, you are the consciousness, the light in which that object, extremely subtle, extremely pleasant, appears and disappears. Don't buy into that. In that way, one attains the supreme knowledge. Some says that the final benefit of self-knowledge is here present as moksha itself, freedom. Freedom for whom? Only for those qualified with good vairagya and good discrimination. Those faculties, those qualities of discrimination and vairagya. Vairagya and discrimination, they go together. We don't know which one should be coming first. They come, to my take, they emerge organically, simultaneously together. You need to have good discrimination to lose the interest upon over things of this world. You need to have a discriminate to see the defects and to see the impermanent nature of everything and so on. And they say, not for me. At the same time, you need to have a certain vairagya to be able to develop that viveka, which allows you to understand the defects on anything that changes. So it has to come together, vairagya and discrimination. The most important, to some degree, pre-qualification or initial qualification. It's very interesting, this topic, because ultimately, after even self-recognition, self-knowledge, one still has to keep association with descriptions, with the Lord and so on, because the human tendency still is there, and there is always room for association and attachment to things and people. You understand? Yanis as well have to watch out. A total vairagya is the ultimate fructification of self-knowledge. You may have a good discrimination to find out the defects on anything made out of prakriti, but yet not to fall for the attraction of your beloved son, for example, and the desire that it overlives you, So all those human attachments are still there. Therefore, there are so many stories describing the nature of a yoni when he's so free from attachment. What comes, comes. What goes, goes. It's I have been seeing it, contemplate on it as the ultimate fructification of self-knowledge is a total non-attachment. So we have to have this discrimination so that we can see the defects, can see the limitation of everything made out of prakriti. I can understand the difference between when you talk about Purusha is the most subtle, the most invisible. But the problem is I need to make a discrimination into the subtle and the tangible things. But there are so many things made of prakriti, which is profoundly subtle and invisible. We cannot discriminate the seen from the unseen, the visible from the invisible. There are so many things in prakriti which is totally visible, and it's so difficult to develop this wisdom, this eye, to see, although it's very subtle and invisible, it's still changing, it's still appearing, disappearing. If it's appearing, disappearing, and changing, it can only be made out of prakriti. This is inference, because prakriti is that which produce, constructs that appear, change, and disappear in that. the difference between Purusha and Prakriti in English language, consciousness and matter/energies. The wise people are going to be able to recognize and identify, to perceive, the absolute invisible principle, subtle principle, nirguna principle, changeless principle from everything else which is saguna and change, and therefore impermanent and temporal. So how the wise people manage to see this? It's gradually. This is the darshan, the vision, the Vedantic vision, the eyes of wisdom, or the third eye, some would say in a mystical language. It allows you to see the difference between the most invisible from the extremely subtle, but yet made out of prakriti. Because ultimately, the discrimination is discrimination between the subtle intellect, highly qualified for Vedanta, and pure limitless consciousness, nirguna consciousness. So you have to have the ability to see the distinction between an extremely subtle intellect doing this viveka, rejecting itself as the ultimate reality and sacrificing itself on the altar of Purusha. That therefore all these concepts that the mind, the intellect has to commit suicide, it's the better picture is to see it's offering itself. The Ahamkara is offering. The Ahamkara can be purified, refined to a point that he's a sage, he's a saint, and so on. And it is yet the Ahamkara is the intellect. And then the moment that one wants to go into this final viveka between the extremely subtle intellect, extremely subtle Ahamkara, it has to surrender itself to that which is Purusha, limitless conscious existence. How do they see this? Gradually developing this eye, this vision, this discernment, the eye of wisdom. We cannot get that from the sense organs and unpurified, unspiritualized, unsubtle mind. Gross mind, we can never see this difference. Just as I cannot differentiate electricity from the fan, my eyes are going to see the fan and they don't see electricity. And even if he has heard about electricity, it forgets because it sees the fan and it wants the breeze coming from the fan. So the light and the hand, they are not physically separate, but intellectually you can separate those two principles. This is a more subtle example. The light and the hand, they are here together. The light is revealing the hand, permeating the hand, illumining the hand, and you cannot separate them. If you take the hand, you have the light, but without a reflecting medium, the light usually is discounted as non-existent. The same problem, consciousness without the body-mind reflecting medium is not really seen because you are able to verify electricity through the bubble shining. You are able to recognize consciousness between the human mind, reflected consciousness. So how are you going to see one without the other? Because if you pull the reflecting medium, you don't see consciousness anymore. If you take the bulb, you don't see the light anymore. So how are you going to see consciousness in the absence of your own body-mind sense complex? That's why we need to know it before we die. That's why we have to offer the Ahamkara or die before we die. the brain, the mind and consciousness, they are not one and the same. Brain's matter, consciousness is a separate principle. First time that I see Swamiji present the mind as a brain, I usually never like to present the brain, but the brain is good example here because it's really tangible. It's made out of gross prakriti. And people have these ideas that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, but it's not at all that way. Consciousness is not part product or property of the brain, as we know. But for the sake of this example, Swamis present that the one who knows the difference, not only from the brain consciousness, from the mind and consciousness, from the subtle intellect and consciousness, the one who can do that kind of viveka, has made the final discrimination and understood the free and independent nature of kshetra and the dependable nature of kshetra. So what are the four differences Swami says here? So we have seen in the previous classes. One is sentient and the other is inert, chetana and achetana. One is nirguna, or the other is saguna. One is attributeless and the other is full of attributes. Consciousness is attributeless. Matter is a byproduct of several attributes put together, or at least one. Nivikaram, savikaram, consciousness is changeless. And prakriti, nature of any and every object, is a constant flux of changing, appearance and disappearance being the most extreme change. So we know those differences we have to keep in mind. Sometimes we may do some nididhyasana, take one of these difference, uncommon features. We can do, okay, so I'm do some nididhyasana about that which changes from that which does not change. So, and I heard, Lindo said that the very, very subtle intellect doing this viveka is a changing phenomenon. How so? It's difficult to believe. So, and then I need to reject my intellect, my subtle intellect doing the very instrument doing the viveka, this discrimination. So I have to see in which way this intellect still is a changing. But no, it's not changing. It's in a state of samadhi. It's like that. Wait and see. It's going to change. So therefore, we can go and do nididhyasana, taking these different uncommon features, and in which way I take some reflections that occur, some byproducts that occur on a very, very sattvic mind state, mental state, which appears to be my ultimate goal, and producing some incredible, beautiful experience or samadhis or deep states, and yet see the prakriti nature of those states. This is the most ultimate, difficult. There is I recently presented this concept in my Portuguese class, that in a more gross level, one of the difficulties among the Vedantins is to take indirect knowledge as direct knowledge, is to take academic knowledge, as the final goal, So it's a little bit more gross, but it's very common. The people who are very much intellectually excited, stimulated by intellectual investigations or journeys, he will study all the Brahma Sutras, all the Upanishads over and over again. He spent lifetimes doing that. And they, more often than not, they take the indirect knowledge to be direct knowledge. It's very tempting for the highly intellectuals to do so. And when you teach Vedanta, you have to tell people about this danger. And the other one is more, it applies more to the world of yoga. The yogis, they are not caring much about the logic presented by the Upanishads, but they want to have samadhi. They want to go into deep meditation and experience those beautiful, wonderful states. And then when those states go to the levels of amazing samadhis, and then what happens? They say, okay, I have come to my destination. When I was there in the United States, and then about 15 years ago, I met a guy when I was going to deep meditation more spontaneously. And then he used to believe that samadhi was the ultimate goal. He used to spend 10, 15 hours meditating. He used to say that Ramana has enlightened him, giving him a new name and so on. And for him, samadhi was the ultimate goal. And he had no problem to say, no, but it is like that. When I come out of samadhi, I lose it and I feel limited again. Therefore, he did not like spend time with interacting with anybody, not even with me. His favorite disciple, I wait my whole life for you to come to visit me. I go there, he used to look into my eyes. And then after 5 minutes, it's enough. It's already disturbing my mental state. And then he would go to his room to do samadhi. So I try to present him the concept that if that state is changing, appearing, disappearing, it cannot be the ultimate reality. Everybody says that it's permanent, it's changeless. But then they tend to say, no, it is like that. It's permanent while it lasts, but then it disappears. So just to invite you to go back to that. And then if you go back again and again and again and again and again and again, one day you are fully fully established in that state. And then I would tell him, but I hear that the nature of all experience is impermanence. It appears, changes, and disappears. There is no experience. No, it's not experience, it's the self. If I hook up to the self and I establish myself there, and then it becomes a permanent. And I hear it all over the place nowadays that I play with a lot of video clips from a lot of people that I used to be associated before I got in contact with Vedanta. This principle, everybody around. I have been looking a lot of so much material that I never got in contact about Ramana. Beautiful. Godman, como é o nome that English guy, Mark? Mr. Godman. He did so much work. He investigated everything, all the details of the teachings of Ramana. And he promotes it big time. He has a good mind and he puts up a lot of effort. But very clearly he states here and there that you have to establish yourself in samadhi forever. The funny thing is that even Papaji was told by Ramana that reality is that which is always present, never changing. That his epiphany is his mystical experience with Krishna and his samadhis. If they are not present all the time, they are not really the real thing, So we have all these common features and uncommon. The difference, the final one we know, one is totally real, reality in terms of Vedanta is that never not present. There we go again. Cannot be a state. Never not present. It exists at all times and exists independently without need to borrow existence, so to speak, from another principle. So the mental states of samadhi, of the meditator, the yogi, is experience a state totally dependent on consciousness. Consciousness does not change. Its samadhi is changing. And samadhi does not have its conscious existence independently. It depends on consciousness, which never changes. The only reality is satya, it's consciousness. Prakriti is mithya. Mithya is that which cannot exist independently. So freedom, moksha, means to say, to understand your free and independent nature as conscious existence, your true intrinsic existence, your true intrinsic consciousness. Prakriti has borrowed existence. The body mind of all jivas has borrowed consciousness. But the borrowed consciousness within the body mind complex of the human jiva allows the jiva to understand, tracing back, so to speak, reflect rays of light to its original source as pure light of consciousness. So we need to understand that the body mind is prakriti. The reflector of consciousness is a byproduct of prakriti, yet, but it has something unique about that, which allows us to understand that although a byproduct of prakriti, because I need a prakriti reflecting medium, I experience reflect on consciousness. Don't get attached to reflect consciousness because it changes. People tend to get attracted to the reflect consciousness, very scientific, but don't go. Even the reflect consciousness is not it, even if it is samadhi. In the language of Nisargadatta, pure consciousness, a pure reflection of consciousness, yet it changes. But by knowledge, you can understand that the consciousness is the same. Here it manifests as dependent consciousness. But by understanding this human consciousness, this dependable, reflected consciousness, I can understand the true nature of this reflected consciousness as original consciousness, the same way I understand the nature of the reflect light we received from the moon as identical, I can the same as the original light rays coming directly from the sun. One is satya, one is mithya. And then the last feature, the last sentence of this verse, it's a bit tricky because it says you did all this viveka between kshetran and k.etrajña. As well, you understood the non-existence of prakriti, which is the cause of the entire cosmos, but it's as good as non-existence. The person who understood the difference between satya and mithya, consciousness and prakriti, in the end, one is real and one is unreal or apparent real, a superimposition, a projection. So you understood the difference between consciousness and matter, and then you understood that consciousness is the only reality. And the prakriti, howsoever subtle it is not real. It's mithya, is another sort of reality, is a mithya reality. It appears as real because it's available for contact, for experience, and even knowledge in regards to, I want to understand this mithya phenomenon here. Although it's available for experience and some sort of relative knowledge, it's unreal. So you understood that prakriti is as good as non-existent. And then you have got the proper understanding. You got the understanding of consciousness, of prakriti, and understood the only consciousness is real, and prakriti is unreal. And here Swami mentioned about that, just to conclude this. It says this last passage of that verse can be confusing for most people. The absence of prakriti does not mean absence of existence. Consciousness is there, light is there. The absence of objects upon which light reflects, reveals, does not mean the absence of light. Understanding that reality, such a reality, is conscious existence, is self-existing. It does not depend on any superimposition to exist itself. So you understand that to exist even the absence of prakriti, because prakriti is almost as good as non-existent. Prakriti is mithya. It has got a borrowed existence, just like our dreams or projection of a move. You understand the nature of Satya and Mithya. Mithya enjoys an apparent reality, apparent existence, so to speak. So Mithya Tvan of what? Of Purusha, of Prakriti. No, Prakriti, of course. Prakriti nature is Mithya Tvan nature. What is Mithya? Is that which is not really real, but somehow appears as such due to Maya, its misleading tendencies. The Mityatvan of matter, which indirectly includes the Satyatvan of consciousness, there are two principles. One is Satyan, reality. The other is unreality. One is Atma, the other is Anatma. Consciousness and energies are unreal, Anatma. Even the most subtle aspects of Prakriti is Anatma. Only consciousness is Atman, Satyam. Those who recognize these subtle distinctions between Satyam will say, Aham Satyam, Jagan Mityam. I am Satyam. The phenomenal world of physical, tangible objects and subtle, extremely subtle objects is Mithya. Therefore, the Mithya order of reality cannot touch me the same way the projection upon the screen in the cinema, move cinema, no? Cannot touch the screen. I'm untouchable, unaffected by any of this. This is the nature of consciousness. It's not a philosophy for as long as we somehow begin shifting our sense of identity to consciousness, and then we start, in spite of our prakriti nature, with limited and bound by time, by weakness, by disease, and this and that. There is this background knowledge, certainty that nothing can touch the real me, the real I, the real consciousness I am. That is the benefit of self-knowledge. Nothing of this world can touch me. Aham Satyam. Everything else is Mithya. Mithya cannot touch me. Only these people attains freedom. Not the yogis experience deep states of samadhi. This is the final benefit of self-knowledge. In Satya, everything is Mithya. Thus ends the 13th chapter, describing the difference between Purusha and Prakriti. Is Prakriti Purusha Yoga, Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Namaste. We're gonna have 2 classes only this week. It could be today and tomorrow, today, Wednesday. Any preference?
Not for me. Whatever
No,
works
both
for
were
you.
okay for me as well. Yeah.
Then let's do today and Wednesday so that I can try to recover my voice before I go back. Okay? Today,
Very good.
Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Arlindo. Great class again.
Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed this as well. Bye-bye.